Hi Chris, how are you?
Good morning, Rod. I'm well. Here we are on a very, very windy Sunday morning recording the show, which is episode 148 on the 24th of November.
It is, and we have Storm Bert causing all of our weather issues, I think, don't we?
I quite like the name of this storm, Storm Bert. I think it's a good name, but yeah, hopefully everybody's okay with the storm because it's pretty bad.
Yeah, I hope everyone's alright. There's lots of power in Scotland, there's snow up in that part of the world. I had a very good chemistry teacher called Bert, once upon a time.
I don't think I know anybody ever called Bert in real life. I think I'm thinking of somebody like out of The Simpsons or something. There's probably a Bert in that, but I can't think.
I bet it's Bert from Sesame Street.
Maybe. Yeah, maybe Sesame Street. Oh, yes. So
Bert
there
and
you
Ernie?
go. Bert and Ernie. That's probably what I was thinking of. Are you getting it now? Yeah, there you go. Bert
There you go.
Ernie.
Bert
Which one's
and Ernie.
Bert? Is Bert on the left or on the right?
Bert's on the right, Ernie's on the left.
Right, okay. I'm glad your knowledge is better than mine.
I grew up with Sesame Street. I knew it better than this British TV shows.
Fair enough. Shall we get straight into the show?
Let's get straight into the show. So I've got an immediate bit of follow-up to begin with, which is I had my very first experience of Apple's Click to Pay.
Tap to pay.
Tap to Pay is what I mean. I hadn't seen it before in all the shops I've been in, but yesterday I went to buy a coffee in Mumbles, and the guy just presented me with his iPhone, and I did my Apple Pay thing as usual, and there it went.
Yeah, this has got to be quite cool, hasn't it? I don't know how it all works. Like, do you need to set up a business account and link it to that? Does SumUp still have a place, or iZettle? Because you've got these different companies that do like iPads and machines and tap things.
I think it's one of those. It's got to have a service provider like Square or someone like that supports it, and I presume that's running on the phone, and you've got an authenticated user with that on either their device or a company-provided device, and there you go. So, yeah, it just worked.
I think this is great. So many years ago, I used to build websites and fix computers for people, and it would have been great when you finish the work to go, here you go, just tap and pay. You know, because people will write me, this was a long time ago, people will write me checks or doing bank transfers. And I think this is great, especially for small businesses. Really good, because hopefully you don't need some big expensive service. So it's great. And was it a good experience for you?
Yeah, it was fine, although it did take quite a while for the notification to come through. Normally, if you're in, I don't know, a Greggs, for example, a bakery chain in the UK, and you buy something, you immediately get that notification from your banking provider on your phone. It didn't get it till last night, but that could just as equally be a function of that company rather than the tap to pay.
Or maybe Storm Bert is causing havoc with their systems.
It's entirely possible, yeah. Should we move on to our first proper story?
Yeah, let's do it. Sorry, I was just rearranging. I've got a board that I stand on. So
You stand on a Ouija board, that's a whole different thing, you know.
That's a whole different thing. I've got
You're contacting the dead
board
there.
Yeah, I'm trying to contact the dead with my feet on my balance board. No, I have a balance board, so when you stand up, you don't get too fatigued, and it's meant to be good for you. And that's why you'll see me rock every now and again.
There you go, inside baseball for viewers of the YouTube stream. Our first proper story is Recall, the oft-delayed feature, if you can call it a feature, not spyware, that's going to be available on Copilot Plus PCs, is now available to beta testers for those with an appropriate laptop.
I think, well done, Microsoft. You're not pushing this on everybody. Like, if you are going to proceed with it, well done. You're rolling it out to beta testers to get some hopefully proper feedback before you go. Here it is. Everybody's got it by default.
I hesitate to say well done, Microsoft, because I think this is a horrible spyware, unnecessary, uncalled for feature. But they got something out.
Completely agree on that one. But
Yeah,
they've got out the door in the right way, haven't they? I think that's the only point I think I meant. I must confess, until I reread this article, I'd completely forgotten it was just Copilot PCs. I just thought it was all PCs, because I was thinking about it from a corporate point of view as well.
No, it's just Copilot PCs. But I don't think there's any real technical reason it couldn't come to higher end or newer AMD or Intel CPUs.
It probably will over time. Have you ever seen a Copilot PC?
Yes, one.
Oh, so you're doing one better than me then. I was just thinking about it now. I was like, I'm not sure I've seen a Copilot PC yet.
I mean, apart from this feature, I think the great thing about Copilot PCs and all the reviews I read about them, and frankly, if you could get Linux running easily on one, I'd have been very interested in one, because the killer feature are nice screens and good battery life. And you and I both like devices from a particular fruit-based company that have great screens and good battery life, and that is the killer feature of current generation Apple laptops, and their efficiency on battery. And that is the thing about these Copilot Plus PCs, is they have that. You're getting 8, 10, 12 hours on one charge and able to do things with them. So if you could have a PC that wasn't spyware, that didn't contain an operating system that was spyware, as this recall feature is, I'd be quite keen on one of them, frankly.
Yep, no, I can understand that. Yeah, I just hadn't seen one actually. That was all. I'm sure they will start gaining more popularity as the price comes down and becomes more readily available. But
I don't know that they will, because whenever I've seen threads for them on Hot UK Deals and sort of UK-based deal sites like that, all the commenters come out and go, no, they're not compatible. They won't run your games. They won't run this. They won't run that. So if that's the general public sort of opinion of them, and I think they've got quite a good translation layer. It's not the best translation layer Microsoft built. I forget what it's called. But in the same way Apple have Rosetta, Microsoft have that. If the general perception is that they're unable to run most of the things that you want to on them, people might not buy them.
that's true. I would imagine in the corporate space, once Office and Adobe are there, they will probably start to gain a little bit of traction. That's my view.
I don't disagree. I guess we'll see what happens. But anyway, for those that want it, you can now get recall on your Copilot Plus PC that all three of you seem to have out there. Should we move on to the next story?
Yeah, let's do it.
And sticking with Microsoft, not only do you get ads for various Microsoft services when you install the operating system and then get continually pestered to make sure you use Edge, if you're a Windows 10 user, you're now going to see full screen ads to get you to upgrade to Windows 11. Oh dear.
I'm a bit mixed on this because I do get frustrated sometimes, like with family PCs, where it's like, why haven't you installed the latest update? It's free. Why wouldn't you do it? So part of me thinks this isn't too bad because Windows 11's free. It's been out for a really long time now. Why shouldn't people be more encouraged to update to it if there's zero cost to them? You get the newer stuff. It's going to be patched better. Because Windows 10 is going to go end of life at some point. So do you not think Microsoft need to be a bit more aggressive in forcing you to update?
Forcing you to update. I mean, there's some stuff.
Assisting you to update, maybe I should say.
I have got thoughts about this, not the least of which is when Windows 11 launched, you needed a TPM module. You needed to have new hardware in your PC in order, which is fine in one sense that you're going to have a higher level of encryption on the PC and you're less likely to be attacked and all that good stuff. But not everybody has hardware that might be suitable for running Windows 11. I know they haven't made a massive hardware change, but there is a factor that you might need to buy a new computer to do this. You may be choosing to run Windows 10 because you're uncomfortable with things like Windows 11 or increased monitoring on the system or whatever else is in Windows 11 that's making you. So if somebody's still running Windows 10 at this point, they either can't afford to upgrade, don't want to upgrade, and I don't think it's lack of knowledge that there's another version of Windows out there that's stopping them upgrading. In the corporate space, if you're running Windows 10, you're paying the extra X pounds per dollars per year in order to keep running it. You don't need an advert stuck in your face. If you're a gamer that doesn't want some feature of Windows 11 or you don't have a TPM module, you don't want this stuck in your face. You've made a deliberate decision not to upgrade to Windows 11. All right, a percentage of people will go, oh, it's free, I can do it. But I do get that if you've made the decision to stay on Windows 10, you should say, leave me alone. I understand my operating system is unsupported. Leave me alone.
Yeah, maybe. But surely they're not pushing this on people that don't have the minimum hardware requirements. But you never know with Microsoft, do you?
This is Microsoft we're talking about here.
Yeah,
so it is what it is. And, as we've just said, and as the article from the Register says, going and buying a new Copilot Plus PC is not a cheap option for people if they're on unsupported hardware. And you don't want the other bits and pieces that come along with it. Moving along to other things that you might not want to come along with it. OpenAI in the news again this week. So they're currently being investigated for scraping content without that permission. So, for example, New York Times or Daily News or other sources that have probably been used as sources of interest to fill the ChatGPT model in. There's an ongoing court case about that. Anyway, they gave their findings to OpenAI to look at, and OpenAI have accidentally deleted it.
Yeah, this is awful, isn't it? So you're going through an investigation. You've handed over some data to, to be investigated and for a third party to have a look at, and then you've deleted the data and you haven't got a backup of it. I mean, none of this sounds good, does it?
No, it's wrong. I mean, mistakes happen, of course they do. You and I have both worked in IT long enough to know mistakes happen. But if you're given trusted data by a source to check out, to examine for yourself, I mean, it makes me slightly question why the New York Times and others didn't have a backup of this data too. But,
I'm amazed OpenAI haven't got a backup of this. I mean, that's what makes it smell a little bit fishy to me.
They probably do have a backup of this, don't they? Let's face it.
I don't know. I'm uncomfortable with the whole thing. I'm just uncomfortable with it because when you provide data like this, you really should be getting slapped on the wrists if you've then deleted it.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a strike against you as part of the court case, isn't it?
100%.
Speaking of court cases, and our next two stories are both around court cases. The first one, as reported on our podcast almost over a month ago now, the Department of Justice is going to do something about Google being a monopoly. The first sort of signs of what it is that they are going to do are beginning to appear, and the thinking is that Google must sell Chrome to crack open its monopoly, and possibly Android as well. But certainly the first part of this is, in DC District Court, the initial proposed final judgment refines the Department of Justice earlier high-level outline remedies after Judge Amit Mehta found Google maintained an illegal monopoly. The filing includes a broad range of requirements, including things like you must divest yourself of Chrome. This would be interesting, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it is interesting because obviously Chrome is massive. It's a free web browser. It's on most platforms. I'm not a big Chrome user, but it was quite interesting. The first thing my brother does when he got an iPhone was put Chrome on it and use Chrome default. And I was like, oh, I just use the one built in. And a lot of our user base at work have to have Chrome, whereas they don't want to use Edge. And again, in a work context, I prefer Edge because everything syncs to your work profile. You don't need a separate account. No, but if you're logging in with your Microsoft account, your Windows corporate account, you kind of want everything just to sync with it. So when you get a replacement device, it just works. So interesting. I do wonder whether when Google originally set up Alphabet, which is Google's parent company, whether some of that might have actually helped them in this scenario if they'd have taken Chrome out of Google and made the Chrome company under the Alphabet umbrella and put some segregation in place, that they were separated, whether that would have actually helped them in the longer term, whereas it feels like they've missed that. Same with Android. I wonder if they called it Alphabet because they were going to start filling up all the letters with different companies, whether that would have actually, like I say, helped them in the longer run. But obviously they haven't done that.
No, that's an odd one, isn't it? And there's lots of options available to the Department of Justice here. So, I mean, other remedies the government is asking the court to impose include prohibiting Google from offering money to anything of value to third parties, i.e. the browser bonuses that they give Firefox and Apple for featuring Google as the search engine. So,
well, it's not just featuring it though, is it? It's making it the default. That's the killer.
It's interesting what you said there a minute ago. From a corporate point of view, you want people to use Edge because it all syncs with a Microsoft account. That's putting Microsoft even more in a monopoly position. What you would want are a sequence of settings that you, as the IT owner for that company, could say, it doesn't matter what the browser is, here's your bookmarks, here's your default, here's your password, settings for all your users, here's your corporate intranet type things. All of it, be it bookmarks, be it user profiles, be it whatever, that just travel across whatever browser it is. And you make an open source set of standards for a browser thing. And then if you want to use Chrome, fine. If you want to use Edge, fine. If you want to use Zen browser, fine.
You're right. That would be the ideal. Like if you would just become browser agnostic, but everything is synced and your passwords all saved, and you don't set up another third-party account and share further data.
Sure, but I mean, again, it shows the monopoly reach all of these companies have. That even you, who is not the most pro Microsoft person in the world, but quite like them corporately, are immediately defaulting to no, Edge is the way because it makes life easier, even though my users demand it. And it is interesting that mindset, be it from Apple, be it from Google, be it from Microsoft, be it from Meta, is what people expect. Oh no, I install my Facebook, therefore I use Messenger, therefore I use Instagram, therefore I use WhatsApp. Or if I'm Google, I use Meet, and and those profiles and those Active Directory accounts, for want of a better, that's the second time this podcast I've done that. Those Active Directory accounts follow you around. There are alternatives to all of these things, and it seems to me the EU and the Department of Justice should be encouraging those open standards to be part of those things, rather than just sort of almost going after individual companies, because the companies are already locking them down like this. You've just explained Microsoft do that. I think all the others do too. So I think there's almost a missing step for them when they go out and say, no, you must sell off that part. It's missing the point, almost.
Yeah, I think you're right in a lot of ways. You're right on the corporate side. It would be way better to remove this locking, which is what it is. And then you're right with Chrome. Whilst it would separate them out from Google as a parent company, is it actually solving the problem? Or when are they going to get Apple to spin off Safari and what have you? Or what happens if Apple set up their own search engine? Do you not need better controls in place so that when companies are multifaceted, there's a better way to govern them and to stop this so that they can continue to to do these things, because this is going to stop companies getting into new markets, because it's like, oh, it's not worth it. We're just going to get split up in 6 years' time.
Yeah, and maybe it offers them opportunities as well. That Apple could go into the corporate space, and I'm going to slightly walk back what I said. I think it's half of the problem that they're solving. Stopping the companies being a monopoly is definitely part of the problem, but you need to offer some sort of solution as well. And if it was the case that you corporately could just swap out Microsoft's thing and swap in Meta's thing or Google's thing or Apple's thing, maybe you'd want to do that. Maybe it would be more competitive. Anyway, we're not the Department of Justice, but just a thought. But who is the Department of Justice, or who's fighting the Department of Justice, is also Apple. And they are trying to stop their judgment, which we know is an ongoing thing, which not much has progressed with, because the wheels of justice, they turn slowly. Since the initial decision that the Department of Justice were investigating Apple for some weird stuff. But basically, they're urging a federal judge to dismiss the court case, although I do quite like the response from the council saying the court is allowed to use common sense. We're here today based on the idea that it's not plausible that Apple has monopoly power, but instead it's at the mercy of supposed global behemoths who are a fraction of its size. Apple is the global behemoth, let's face it. I think that's well said.
100%. And you got to love the picture they've picked of Tim Cook there, haven't you? Like with that weird sort of frown on his chops. So I like they've done. I do like The Verge. I think they've got a great write-up on this.
Yeah, they've got some good reporting. But anyway, the case continues as far as we know. I mean, it keeps saying the case is overly speculative, which is fair enough. And, I do think a lot of these things are going to go away with the Trump administration. I think Trump is quite pro-big tech, and big American tech particularly. Apparently, Tim phoned Trump just after the election to say, can you help us out with this EU thing? So I suspect that all these lawsuits are going to go away. Although he doesn't like Google very much, does he, Trump?
No, apparently not. But is he going to go away, or is it just a stay of execution for this term of presidency, and then will it come back around again in 4 years' time?
Well, Apple are still being monopolistic, aren't they? The thing is, let's not get too political. I was about to go down on a rant about things there. Let's instead turn to iOS and macOS patches. So 18.1.1 and Sequoia 15.1.1 were released. Apparently there were active vulnerabilities being exploited in 18.1 and 15.1. So I think this is probably a good thing that they got these patches out.
Yeah, look, it's good that Apple keeps stuff up to date. I do worry, though, that sometimes users get fatigued with it. Oh, I've got to update my phone again. And it is tricky to get that balance right, I think. But it's better that they patch it than they don't, I guess. So, yeah.
It is. And to your earlier point about Microsoft and full screen ads, when you get an OS update from Apple, it tends to just be a little bit of text at the bottom of the update screen rather than entirely taking over your phone screen or your Mac screen. So it can be done without being too in your face.
It can, but then a lot of people just miss it and don't update to the newer version. And it's, but then I've noticed that with my family's phones, Apple aren't pushing 18 at the moment. There usually comes a point when they turn the dial up that it gets a little bit more aggressive. Not full screen ads, but it becomes the de facto. Whereas at the moment, they're still keeping people on the 17 branch unless you opt into the 18 branch.
Yeah, I think that's fair. This is good. I would say security patches are always a good thing, particularly if there is active exploits, unless you're CrowdStrike, obviously. But get out there now and update your Macs and your iPhones and your iPads if you haven't already.
Completely agree.
Apple Intelligence. Should we talk about that for a minute?
Yeah, why not? Everybody's favourite topic. It feels like this is a topic that's going to burn for the next 12 to 18 months.
I don't think you're wrong. Apple need to do something here because the overwhelming opinion seems to be that it's pretty bad.
It's pretty bad. I wouldn't disagree with that. I heard somebody on a podcast say, with regard to summarization features, and I think they said I have to read the summary and then I have to go and read the individual text to make sure I understand what's going on, because the summary, more than often than not, is incorrectly summarized what it's meant to be telling you. So yeah, I'm just looking at the ones you're showing on the screen now, and I've seen this with it. I've read the summary and it's like, hang on, is that really what that person said? And then you open it up and it's like, oh no, it's got the complete wrong meaning or sentiment of the text.
I quite like these. This is the summarization feature. You and I have talked before we got this far about how ridiculous and bad that they are from time to time, and this just continues this sort of loss of context, too much overload, poor summaries, makes no sense, and just plain wrong, And I think this Ars Technica article does a very good job of particularly highlighting this part of Apple Intelligence and how rubbish it is. And I'd agree with that. And this is part of a theme that's emerging, that not only are the summaries bad, but Apple's advertising is bad, as we talked about last week, with how tone deaf it's been. With your users are lazy and stupid, can't be bothered doing their jobs properly, and want the minimal effort thing of intelligence going on. And I think this has been compounded. And we'll turn back to Marques Brownlee, who is hopefully avoiding a bit of controversy this week. Has also done it's about a 20-minute video review of how he's found Apple Intelligence. Also, for the viewers of the podcast, you'll be able to see that on the screen now. And his review was fair, but also it comes down on the negative side. It's not adding very much to the product.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with that. Sorry, I was just trying to find a setting where you were talking, because there is a way of turning off summarization on a per app basis, but I can't remember where the setting is because it's buried somewhere. I think Marcus is right, though. I think there's some okay bits, but on the whole, it's not fantastic. But I think they're so busy rushing to do the next phases, they haven't really got time to go back and actually sanity check what they have put out there and probably deal with the feedback. I think because they're, like I say, they're rushing to get the next bit out or get it into the next part of the world because they're localizing it. I'm mixed on it, if I'm honest. I think the message summarization is a bit poor, and I haven't really used the writing tools. I'd rather write my own thing, because I think by the time I've spent this time feeding an AI model to write something for me, I could have just written it myself. But maybe that's just me, and my brain's not wired that way.
I don't think you're wrong. The little bits that are handy about these kinds of tools, like please check my grammar, please check my tone, review it as if you were read it as if you were a reviewer of this, where it gives you tips to improve your writing. That's probably quite useful. Writing it for you is a failure, though, and it's often just badly wrong. As an experiment, and this isn't Apple Intelligence, I downloaded one of these run on your own machine models just to see how it would do to feed in my own documents. Disconnected my machine from the internet and did it. And it decided based on my CV that I was female, and when I tried to correct it that I wasn't female, it refused to believe me and said, this person's pronoun is their own. And I couldn't convince it in any other way, despite feeding in a bunch of my documentation and all the rest of it. So that was a problem, that you couldn't get it to... I know. And if that's on my own writing, disconnected from the internet, unaffected by sort of the learning of whatever else has been put into it and is being actively put into it by other users, it's no wonder Apple Intelligence is having these issues, that they're trying to play it so safe with the on-device model and what's there and what they've taught it with, that it's just failing in all the levels, really. At least the ChatGPTs and these other models can be upgraded over time to improve them, because they're at the cutting edge of this. I feel Apple isn't at the cutting edge of this. It's why it defaults back to ChatGPT as much as it does, or wants to, which I haven't enabled on my phone. By the way, I very quickly deleted that model because I don't think they add anything to your work, frankly. There was another study out last week that said, users that use a lot of ChatGPT LLM-based things on their computers aren't as productive as users who don't. And you can understand why. It's because they're sitting there trying to feed the model rather than getting on and doing their jobs. And I think this is very dangerous for Apple, that they've got this perception that their new phones have this amazing new feature of Apple Intelligence, and users will use it. Let's face it, most of these still haven't seen the Genmoji or the Image Well or all the other things that they've brought into this visual intelligence yet. And when they do, they'll be so disappointed they'll stop using it, and they'll equate Apple with being behind on these things. And stuff like this from Marques and stuff like the review on how bad the notifications aren't helping this perception.
No, they're not. I think you're quite right. And one thing I'd forgotten about is you can highlight some text in Safari, right-click, writing tools, summarize it, but it's so buried. Are people going to notice it? I don't know. Yeah, I'm mixed on it. And when I've used the proofreading and I've asked it to make suggestions, it just shows me some alternative text to mine, but it doesn't highlight what it's done differently. And I just found it really frustrating to use, if I'm honest.
And as Marques points out in this video, you've got duplicated things. Writing tools show writing tools, and they're duplicated again in all the sub-menus. So the UI is not even very good.
Yeah, it feels like they're trying to force it in everywhere to get you to use it. So if you don't know about it, you will trip over it at some point.
So let's hope we see some rapid evolution of this. I think we're all going to have to accept that these tools are just going to be part of our operating systems moving forward, and it's killing the planet even faster, but that's a whole different thing. But Yeah, so a bit nasty, not very good, not being well received. But you better pay attention, Apple. Again, I'm still grateful I have more RAM in my Mac Mini and my next generation iPhone as a consequence of this. But I don't think the features are worth it. I don't think you can sell devices based on these fairly half-baked things.
No, we discussed this at work. So we currently buy 2 generations previous iPhones because they're at a sweeter spot. So we're currently buying iPhone 14s, and we did have the discussion. Well, you're not going to be able to get Apple Intelligence on them, and it's like, oh, okay, I think that's fine. It was kind of where we ended up very quickly, and we're worried about it in a year's time when we make the next switch, because I don't think we're missing anything at the moment.
No, I'd agree. Should we do some news?
By the way, just to wrap that up, I do hope I eat my words in iOS 19 or something, and it is better and it is additive to my day. I don't want to be a complete negative on it, but I just don't think we're there yet.
Well, there you go. It's rare that we're both negative on something. Normally you might manage to find something positive, but well done finding something positive in the end. Should we do some news?
Yeah, let's do it.
So let's stick with not positive stories, or not a not positive story, but just an interesting way of looking at things. And once again, Jason Snell, I think, has hit the nail on the head with the lockdown nature of the iPhone and the iPad and the promise that is the Mac, really. So this is a very long article, and I would recommend that you read it in its entirety because it's very well written, as Jason's work often is. And he goes through a bit of history about how we've ended up where we are, with the iPhone launching, it being very locked down, Apple struggling to get their own apps up and running on it, Steve Jobs coming out on stage and saying, well, we're going to release an app store, but until then you've got the web. The web works perfectly well. And then the word being carefully said is in shitification, the platform, Apple realizing that they had a lockdown marketplace into which developers would become Apple employees, frankly, where they could control what developers were able to put on their platform, what standards of code, what they would link to, what they would say, and getting further away from the ideals of the computer, which was a device that you bought that you could run whatever software you wanted to on it. And Apple were able to offer this platform that was controlled. And it's none of what he said is new. I think he's just said it in a very sensible way, bringing all the arguments to the fore about how we always need to be able to run our own programs at whatever risk to ourselves on our computers. And the iPhone is a computer, and really that should be the same, but at least we've got the Mac.
Yeah, and obviously Apple have tried to bring the Mac in more in line with the iPhone and failed dismally, I think. I was interested with where Microsoft went with it, in that they've obviously got their own Windows store, and then they brought in other people's stores as well. And Microsoft, I think, have done it in a slightly better way. Here's ours if you want it, but there's other options out there, kind of thing. And I wish Apple had gone more down that route rather than going, everything must be in the App Store. And then they've just never made it really work. They've never invested enough to make the App Store good enough. And obviously you don't want to force everybody to do everything one way, but they've never really embraced others either. And it just all feels they've started something and they've never finished it. And I think they should have had a more open. They should make the App Store better, 100%. But equally, they should be more supportive of alternatives.
I think they realised it was too different from what the iOS and iPad app stores were, because it was too limiting. The sandboxing of apps in the Mac App Store was too limiting for apps like Carbon Copy Cloner and others that do whole disk encryption and all those things that you'd want to do with a computer-based thing, which they would never allow on the iPhone. And as soon as they realised that dichotomy, that they would never allow the same amount of control to Mac users that they wouldn't allow to iPhone users, it's kind of pointless. So there's some stuff in there, it's a bit of a mishmash. I don't think Microsoft have got it right either, because it's not like Steam has gone away just because Microsoft have an app store, or the Adobe Creative Cloud has gone away. I don't know many users that actually extensively use the Microsoft Windows Store. It's a very ignored thing. You run it more corporately than I do, but certainly in our enterprise, I don't see people using the Windows App Store to immediately go and re-download all their apps.
No, I wouldn't say it's extensive, but I think Microsoft haven't done what Apple's done, where they started off where it's just our way or no way kind of thing. Whereas I think Microsoft would be more open to more ways of it working, if that makes sense. They haven't blocked like Ubisoft or Steam or anything like that.
Although I think they have. If you're running Ubisoft games on your Windows PC at the moment, you're not getting patches. I'm sure I recently read that.
Yeah, apparently they've pulled the update so that if you are running, I think Windows 11, and you have some Ubisoft games installed, it won't download the next update because it's got a crasher in it.
Well done, Ubisoft, as always, making great stuff. Or maybe it's Microsoft's fault. Who can tell?
Yeah, who knows? It's an odd one, isn't it?
It is an odd one. Close to my heart, FourSquare. have always tried to be good stewards, they say, of the open standards of platforms and open source community. And they've donated a bunch of their data back to the geospatial community. So if you want to do mapping or charting or understanding patterns of flow or things like that, then that data is now openly accessible for people to model. Open places is a thing. They're going to try and maintain it. I think FourSquare is becoming less and less relevant, frankly, as time goes on and Google Maps and the other platforms exist. So I think this is just a good thing for them to donate that data, those data sources, to the geospatial and mapping communities. Understanding how crowds perform and how people behave within environments is really important. We have work at my workplace where we look at the impact of, for example, parks on human beings or access to beaches and things like that, and how that socially reflects upon you. If you live near a bunch of takeaways, chances are you're going to eat a lot of takeaway food. That kind of stuff. So I think having this kind of data in the in an open source way is a good thing.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with that, and it's good FourSquare carrying on and like you say, providing open initiatives. One thing I was going to say is I was in London the other day and I saw TomTom on a car driving around mapping.
Really?
I thought TomTom had disappeared because of all the various other mapping technologies, but obviously I was wrong. But I was really surprised to see TomTom because they're a brand name were very prevalent. Obviously, doing units that you had in your car and had mapping, but just very odd that they're still going.
I think if you still go into your Apple Maps application, does it not say at the bottom navigation data provided by TomTom?
Yeah, I'd forgotten about that. You're going to make me go and have a look now, aren't you?
I'll let you have a look while I remove the story and move on to the next one. So, back to Apple's legal problems, and this is a news story for Apple. They're facing antitrust action in the UK over their default web browser, but not cloud gaming. I mean, we know cloud gaming had been a problem for Apple. They weren't allowing things like the Xbox Store or Steam to stream games natively on there. But it's always interesting when it's specific to the UK, for us being a UK-based podcast, that the CMA has provisionally concluded the company abuses its control over iPhone apps. And to me, I think this is the UK being like 2 years behind the EU on things. The DMA came along, that we've seen the impacts of that on Apple, how they're changing things, and the UK needs to slightly, at the moment at least, stay vaguely in line with what the EU is doing for the way we transfer data around and how we work with the EU and all the rest of it. And I suspect this is just us getting in line with them, and this is the tip of the iceberg for what we are going to enforce on Apple going forward. But it is interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, it is interesting, and it's just not going away for Apple, is it? I think it's just going to be continued. And these are just ones we know about. There's probably other countries going down the same avenue.
Well, almost certainly. I mean, we know about Korea, we knew about the Dutch dating stuff, we know about all these impacts that Apple are having, and presumably Google are as well. So they're going to have to change. And all the stuff they're fighting against, and back to Jason Snell's article, they could have, we've said this so many times, they could have got out in front of this. They could have allowed one checkbox that said, I can install what I like on my computer, my device, and they'd have been fine. As they are allowing now in the EU with all their caveats.
Yeah, and I'm just going to give you some real-time follow-up. I can't find the TomTom logo. Sorry. Just slight aside. It's driving me mad trying to find it, so I'm going to stop that. But you're right. Version 1 of Apple Maps used to have TomTom in it.
It did.
This whole antitrust stuff, it's just, I don't know, big tech and antitrust, it does feel like we're going to have years of this. It's not going to be done in 25, is it? It's just, there's going to be more and more, and I think there'll be more and more countries getting involved.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to talk about this anymore, really, in many ways, isn't it? It's amazing to me that such a large company whose profits are so dependent on so many nations is so resistant. I mean, it must be really, really worth it to them to have it so locked down to the way that they do. They've made a huge amount of money. The services revenue we talk about every financial quarter grows and grows, doesn't it? And this is part of that, is making sure the developers pay it. But at the same time, that other side of the coin with the goodwill of the developers, and as we've seen with the continued, I'm going to call it, failure of the Vision Pro, it's an ongoing thing. They haven't engaged with people going forward. And the amount of money and the goodwill thing, it's very fickle.
No, agreed. And if only Apple could have seen this coming and could have dealt with this in their own time.
So in other things that Google is trying to do to keep up with Apple in this case is that Android, oh, that's the wrong link. Well done, Rod. Android will soon instantly log you back into your apps and new devices. I think this is a good thing. So iOS tries to do this a little bit if you've ever transferred to a new phone. Some of your apps seem to persist your logins across them, not banking and things like that, but certainly some apps do. And Apple is going to try and store all your Google is going to try and store all your credentials, so when you move to a new Android phone, a lot of that stuff will move with you, and I think this can only be a good thing.
I completely agree. Reading it, though, I was amazed Google didn't already do this, because I think the Apple experience is pretty good. I just assumed Google already had this in place for developers so that they could persist, when they got a new phone. So it does make sense, because when people upgrade, you want them to be able to get off their old phone quickly and trade it in, rather than having two phones because they don't know their login details, and that you know what I mean. You just want a nice, quick experience. So it's become a lot easier, because I remember in the past when I'd upgrade people's phones, you just hold on to your old one for a little while, just to make sure everything works before we wipe it, pass it on, recycle it. But you want to do that quickly, I think, and get people to wipe their old phones and recycle it, and do something with it rather than it just sat on the shelf. So I think this is good, but yeah, surprised it's so far behind with it.
Yep, I'm glad that it's there. I mean, there are some of those things. A particularly egregious example is Microsoft's Authenticator app, actually, is how locked down that is to one device. Certainly for, I don't know what it's like in your corporation, but for the NHS particularly, moving Authenticator from one thing to another is painful, absolutely painful.
Yeah, that could be a lot smoother. I would concur with that statement.
Yeah, so that's not on Apple or on Google. That's entirely on Microsoft's front door, that one. One thing that's at Apple's front door is the way that it's perceived in the United States, and the way it's about to be perceived is it's going to be treated like a bank more than anything else, and this is entirely a consequence of Apple Pay and Apple Card. So it will now see the Cupertino company regulated by the US Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. That will have the power to monitor and regulate Apple's policies and practices in regard to mobile wallet services. That's probably slightly worrying for Apple. They want to be seen as a tech company, not a bank.
Yeah, it's going to bring more regulation, so they're going to have big tech regulation and big bank regulation. Do you think this is also because they've got more money than most banks?
I think they absolutely do have more money than most banks. Let's face it. They're in a very dominant position in lots of markets. Dropping computer from their name, which Steve did way back when, has never seemed more appropriate.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine them being called Apple Computer Incorporated. It's just Apple, isn't it? Because they're so agnostic now. They're in so many different sectors.
They are. So there's not much more to be said about this other than, well done. Welcome to a whole new world of regulation, Apple.
Yay.
Yay.
If you were Tim Cook, now's a good time to retire, surely.
I would move on, yeah. Another thing that they're doing, they're going to start selling their own Apple News ads. Apple News is a terrible service. The more I think about it, the more it really annoys me. I know you say you fire it up in the morning and have a scroll through it, but I just think it's a garbage service that it poorly aggregates things. It doesn't block things very well. The stories that it highlights have very little relevance to me. My usual negative view of things and your positive thing will come along. I think there are better news aggregators that you can, do a better job of it, that aren't infested with ads for a service that I already pay for. Thank you very much.
I quite like it. Maybe we won't see the ads if we get News Plus. Maybe that will be a perk of News Plus, because we do get the magazines. I actually quite like it because I get the Times included, and sometimes the Times has articles I want to read. I don't disagree. I don't think it's a brilliant app in any way, but for me, grabbing some headlines, I can skim through it, and it does what I need in the morning just to give me a quick briefing of what's going on.
We're going to talk about a social media platform later that will let you do this, in and of itself, frankly. But I'm quite down on Apple News Plus. It's the thing I launch least. I launch it once a month to look for Linux format magazine. That's my entire experience of launching Apple News.
That's fair. I can understand that, and it is nice that's included.
Yeah, well, it is, but I don't think the service it gives me for the subscription to magazines is any better than, I think it was Readly I had before, where I had far more choice and in a far more flexible way of looking at things. I'm actually going to get angry about Apple News in a minute, the more I think about it. Because the other thing that makes me angry is this subscription should also include Apple Books. Why doesn't it include Apple Books? That's a whole service they provide. We could have audiobooks and we could have reading books. And that might actually make news or whatever book service would come along with it more compelling.
Yeah, I think, and I was listening to podcasts about this, I think Apple Books just faltered when they went through the anti-competitive thing, and they've just never, again, they've half done it, and they've never done an Audible subscription or a Kindle Unlimited. And I think Apple wanted to do everything, and then again they've just half done books. So that's probably a separate topic for another day. But I was thinking about it today. Like, I would probably use Apple Books if they did a black and white Kindle equivalent reader, because that's how I want to consume my digital books. I don't want to be on a non-waterproof big color iPad just before I go to bed. I want to be reading a book and relaxing. So and ideally distraction free. But I think books is just something Apple probably started, and it's probably been a step too far in a distraction. I think Apple News is okay. Do I think they could make a better app? Yes. Do I think they should do something different with magazines? Maybe the magazines should be split out, and that should go back and call it Newsstand, and just have it for your News Plus, downloadable magazines, newspapers, content. I always like the digital newspapers and mags that actually look like the printed versions, rather than just ones that are HTML scrolling text that just look like a website. So I read enough websites. I actually prefer the newspapers I buy a digital subscription to look like a newspaper, because that's what I enjoy. What is the daily newspaper? That's what I want to look at.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at a magazine like Top Gear and its implementation inside of Apple News, it's dreadful. Absolutely dreadful.
I barely look at it.
Yep. So I like you say, it's Apple News is now making me officially angry. I'm going to move on before I lose my temper about it. Let's talk about Microsoft again, because the other £30 gorilla in the room, £50 gorilla in the room. They've released a new computer this week. Yay!
I think you should be talking £1 trillion.
Well, whatever. They've released a new computer this week. It's always interesting when Microsoft puts out new hardware. The Surface laptops are quite well regarded. The Xbox is quite well regarded. This is also garbage, though, as far as I'm concerned. What they've done is they've released a $349 thin client. So a thin client, for those that don't know, is a machine with very limited amount of processing that connects to a server application, normally to run a desktop, once upon a time just to run a terminal. So that's where that sort of terminology came from. This makes no sense to me that it should be so expensive. There's nothing you can do on this $349 device you couldn't do on a Raspberry Pi for 50 quid.
Yeah, a couple of things on this. One, if weird thin clients seem to be having a second coming, because you and I probably administered corporate IT when thin clients were more of a thing. I certainly remember it. I kind of want this in a laptop. Most employees are hybrid. And why can't I have this in a $350 laptop that I could plug a screen into and a mouse and a keyboard? And then my corporate employees, they could have a cheap device they could take between home and work, and connect all the M365 services they need, all the cloud apps they need, because the majority of what we do is cloud-based these days. So I just don't get it. $350 for a puck that doesn't do anything seems like a lot, especially in a world where we're not at our desks anymore. 20 years ago, this probably made a lot more sense when you're sat at your desk. But how many employees actually have a desktop these days?
Very few. I mean, I genuinely don't understand this. I mean, all right, this doesn't have a screen, so this is very close to being what you just discussed. This is a Raspberry Pi 400. This will support 2 displays. It has Ethernet built into it. This is, for those that are listening and not watching the thing, this is a Raspberry Pi stuck inside of a keyboard. So a single board computer stuck inside of a keyboard with the ports on the back. That is a keyboard. So this is actually more functionally complete than that Microsoft thing.
I completely agree with you. I just don't understand that Microsoft thing at all. Like I say, for me, package it as a laptop and you're more likely to get my buy-in.
So, and you can buy a screen. You can buy a touch screen, one of those secondary monitors with an HDMI input for 60 quid, and you've got a laptop for 120 quid. This Microsoft thing is just pointless. Absolutely pointless. They must have something in mind for it for corporate customers. I don't know, stock trading floors or something like that, where you can plug in multiple devices and then update them fairly easily. But I don't think they're having a good run with hardware at the moment, Microsoft. Between this and the Snapdragon developer unit that they canned, they seem to be struggling a little bit on the hardware side. I don't know how well their Surface laptops are selling, but this is a weird direction to go in. I suppose if I take a step back and think about it, they haven't done very well with mobile phones, for example, either recently. So maybe they are struggling a little bit on the hardware front.
I think they're struggling to find their niche. They did well in the Surface line when it first launched. They keep iterating on it, but you don't see many corporations with them. Most corporations have got Dells, HPs, Lenovo's. So, yeah, I think they're struggling to find their niche.
I mean, even a 10-year-old small form factor Dell Optiplex or something like that has more functionality than this and will run this exact same software well.
But I think that's the problem, though. You can buy a Dell skinny computer that looks just like this for about $400 and has got more compute inside it. I was about to question you at the top when you said Microsoft had brought out a new computer. I was like, is this a computer?
Well, I mean, it must run something minimal to get it up and running. It's still a computer, but it's a pointless. Don't keep your old PC on the desk corporately and just run your terminal services on the other end of it. Remote desktop client. You don't need to upgrade it to something like this.
This will be dead in 12 months. It's my prediction.
I think it's dead already.
Fair.
Should we do some media instead?
Let's do media.
Let's do media, and give me just a second while I try and click on the right link, and you might want to make a little note in the show notes while I cock that up. Pause. Thank you. Let's do media. So first thing from me, I finally started watching season 2 of Silo. I put it on last night to watch episode 1. Series 1 ended on a big cliffhanger. Right back into it. What a great episode. Thoroughly enjoyed it. Have you watched any Silo yet?
I've not, but I've got to go and watch the whole first Silo. But it does look good. And I did read an article. Apparently they're dropping season 2 episode 2 earlier than planned, which seems odd to me. But I guess they're maybe trying to get off the good news that episode 1 has got and get episode 2 out the door a bit quicker. It looks right up my street. I need to just set some time aside and watch season 1. The problem I have, I think, in my house, my kids are staying up later, and so I seem to have a smaller window of opportunity to watch more adult-y things because they're just not ready for that yet. So it does look good though.
I think it's based on a young adult novel, so I know they're quite young kids, but it's not the most adult themed thing. There's no sex in it, for example, and I think the swearing is fairly minimal, and the violence is, as you'd expect the violence to be, really. It's sort of more psychological drama more than anything else. But
no, it does look good, and it's nice to see some really good content coming out on Apple TV Plus.
Absolutely. Something else that's fantastic that I think I mentioned last week, but I just want to reiterate how awesome it is Shogun on Disney Plus in the UK. I have 1 episode left. This has been, I got to say, one of the best TV shows I've watched in years. It has been absolutely terrific. It looks beautiful. The acting is incredible. You're learning stuff about history as you go along. It's just been terrific. So I'm thoroughly looking forward to watching my last episode of this. It's been a tour de force.
Stop giving me more TV shows to watch.
Get on and watch some then.
Yeah, I know, I'm awful.
Fair enough. I thought I'd let you take the next one, really, because you're the Formula 1 fan.
Yeah, this is the one thing I wouldn't mind a Vision Pro for, but then I try and watch F1 with family or friends. But this is about an app called Laps with a Z, so LAPZ. The developers have written an app. They've put it out on test flight because they're still iterating on it. It's available on the Vision Pro. And basically, you can pop your Vision Pro on, you can have the race in front of you, you can have the lap times up on one window, you can have other cameras in other windows, and you can have a full cockpit of screens in essence and really get immersed in the race, which looks awesome. So I quite like the look of it, and if something was going to make me to buy a Vision Pro, assuming it was about a third the price, this would probably have tipped me over the edge. But Apple have come along and said, you need to remove it from test flight, because it feels like they were eking out the test flight period. I think it's been going for about 6 months now. And they've got unlicensed content from F1. So there are obviously some issues there, but is that Apple's problem or is that F1's problem that an app's using unlicensed content? You know what I mean? Apple trying to get involved, is this their fight? I don't know.
Well, there'd be a DMCA takedowns and all that kind of stuff if they were showing unlicensed content. It says in the article that you should be logging into the F1 app using your own login to do this kind of stuff, or certainly it's possible to do that. I think it's a bit he said, she said on this kind of stuff, that obviously the team should be using licensed content to do this. You would have thought that the group at Liberty Media, whoever it is, should be absolutely grabbing these guys and getting them to develop some of their streaming content.
But what should happen here, though, is Apple should be working with them, shouldn't they, and helping them, because this is a great showcase app. They should be working with them in Formula One to go, let's make this a thing, because it's great for our platform, it's great for you, Formula One, and it's good for you, the developers. You've got a great app, a really neat idea. Why wouldn't they do more with this? And and actually turn what is currently a bad situation, people using unlicensed content, and turn it into a real positive. And I think that's where Apple are missing the trick a little bit here.
Yeah, it's because the Vision Pro's dead.
Wow, that's a statement. What dies first, Microsoft's Stream Link PC that we just looked at, or the Vision Pro?
It's the second time this episode I've said it. I'm hanging my hat on it. I think the Vision Pro is not long for the world. If you listen to ATP this week, Marco goes off on a long rant about how bad it is with the battery life on the Vision Pro, and the fact that if you bought one or if you rented one, you don't need a week. You can get through all of the content in one evening. for the Vision Pro, and he was quite bullish on it to begin with. He quite enjoyed it. I think of those podcast hosts, only Casey is the one who sort of really, really uses it now. But as a developer, he doesn't see the return on investment. I think we see Apple not making them anymore. I don't think we see a dramatic increase in content. When there is content, it's 7 or 8 minutes tops. They all pulled the Vision Pros out to watch a music video. What's that about?
It's just because it's new content, isn't it, I guess. Do you not think one of a cool feature is the ability to do the Mac thing where you can look at your Mac and it projects a screen on it, and in the latest betas you can now have widescreen Mac and extra widescreen Mac, and so you've got a nice big developer space all around you. Like if you're a coder, I think that would be quite cool potentially. I don't know.
All right, so £3,500 for a slightly grainier high-res screen next to me. How much is a even very expensive 49-inch Samsung OLED or something like that? 1,500 quid, £2,000?
Yeah, look, it's not for me. It's far too much money, and I don't think the optical ability of it is anywhere near as good as it needs to be. So,
back to the point, I agree with you. I think this app is a very cool thing, and for me, if there was MotoGP and something like this, I'd be all over it like a rash. If Apple got behind it, put the marketing thing, there's enough Formula One fans out there that you could probably get enough interest for them to do this. But if this device was 500 quid, Liberty Media would buy these developers, this would be up and running and be an official thing, and Formula One fans would be loving it. Yeah. But all the points behind this are bad. So,
why aren't Apple doing this with MLS? They own MLS streaming in America. Nobody's doing it, I guess.
Nobody's doing it. They don't have developers to do it. Nobody's got the headsets. No, they don't see a revenue stream here. If there were lots of headsets and they could charge another $5 per head for a subscription to get, where all the players on the field and, what were the last potential, whatever else would you want from soccer, go for it. But I think it's just bad all around.
You can have real-time VAR, which is what they use when there's potential foul and stuff like that. No, I think you're right. It's amazing though, MLB, I don't think they've made much noise because on the Apple TV, you can have 4 streams at once on the Apple TV. Surely that's begging to go on something like the Vision Pro. But again, how many people want to watch stuff for long periods of time with something glued to their face because it's not comfortable?
Lots of people watch sports socially. They don't just sit by themselves in a room with it. And this is cool if you're nobby no mate sitting there, doing this. But you watched Formula One this morning. Did you do it by yourself?
No, I sat with my 10-year-old son and we curled up on the couch. Yeah. We lit the fire. We watched the telly. It was great. Yeah.
If you're going to watch soccer, you're probably going to a pub and watch it with your mates. A lot of the time. You don't want to strap something to your face and do it. It's a dead end. It's a dead end.
Fair.
Something else that may also be a dead end is the amount of stuff that Apple's actually putting out there. So apparently they've spent $20 billion on original content and nobody's watching it. And I genuinely think this is a problem for Apple. That the shows that you and I talk about every week, Silo as we just discussed, Slow Horses as is featured in the article, are genuinely excellent shows that I get excited about. And when new seasons drop, I want to watch them. Yeah, there's some rubbish on there, but every streaming channel has some rubbish too. In the main, it's high quality stuff that I want to watch. If it goes away, that's not great. It's a shame they've failed to get it in front of more people's eyeballs, really.
Well, it's kind of that Apple Books thing again, isn't it? They've half committed to it. I think they stumbled with Apple TV Plus because they just did it on their own hardware to begin with. Then they've trying to get it out on other devices, and I just think they haven't done a great job of really pushing it so you could watch it anywhere. Netflix's biggest thing that made them so popular was we don't care what you watch it on, just watch it. Do you know what I mean? And it's worked really well for Netflix. They should have employed the guy, the girl, the team at Netflix that did that. Like, who came up with getting Netflix everywhere? We need them. How do we get it on every TV ever made and have a dedicated button? And then they would have driven more people to it.
Yeah, and the article's very good. And after 5 years in the market and a report of $20 billion in spending, Apple can't be happy with 0.3% of the streaming market. Yeah, that's not a lot of people, is it?
No, and it's a crowded space and people don't want more subscriptions. I get it.
And it's confusing. Can you only watch Apple TV Plus on your Apple TV box in the Apple TV app?
Yeah, it is confusing. I completely agree with you. And that's what I mean. That's why they needed the Netflix team to really go get Apple TV anywhere and to move away from that. They should have called it something different, I think, in a way that wasn't the same name as an app and a piece of hardware they already had.
If you're a Ted Lasso fan and you came to Apple TV to watch Ted Lasso, there isn't any more Ted Lasso. And if you didn't investigate anything else while you were there, you're gone. So you spent your whatever it is these days, £8 to get an Apple TV Plus. You blitzed your 3 seasons. You checked out a couple of other things, and you thought, right, that's me. When they bring another Ted Lasso, I'll come back. So you're not going to get recurring revenue either.
Or you used your free subscription because you bought a new iPhone.
Yeah, exactly. So I can understand why they've got problems here.
Agreed. Hopefully they will carry on, though, and correct the wrongs and not just let it wither on the vine.
Yep. Do you want to tell us about JFK?
Yeah, so I've put the wrong link in. That's my mistake. I've watched a JFK documentary, and I've put a link into the JFK film with Kevin Costner by the looks of it. So I watched a 3-episode documentary on Disney Plus. So 3 episodes, that's all right. Interesting, the whole JFK sequence of events. But I was really disappointed. It just didn't really tell me anything I didn't know. They interviewed some people that were there at the time. I thought it might be some more footage, but it was just really disappointed, and they really stretched it out. Thank you, Rod. You found the correct link. They've really stretched it out, though, the footage, very slow shots, and I was just a bit disappointed. I was hoping to have a bit more of an insight into the sad assassination of JFK many years ago now. So, but really, really interesting, some of the footage, and the one interesting bit, I guess, is how some of the original footage has scaled up to 4K. When it blows my mind sometimes, I think when somebody gets original footage and can make it look amazing in 4K, and then obviously you see some very lower quality footage. But some of that was interesting, but the show on the whole was disappointing. So sad I can't recommend. It was a bit like the Ted Lasso book I said was my thing of the week last week. It was interesting, but didn't really teach me anything new. So there you go. That's my very brief review of JFK.
That is a shame.
It's a shame.
I haven't seen the film because it's like a 5-hour film or whatever. I've never
film's
bothered
okay.
watching it.
I mean, again, it just stretches out the sequence of events. The best bit to watch about JFK is the Red Dwarf episode where they go back in time to the assassination, because it's so well done. It's one of my favourite Red Dwarf episodes. So there you go.
Here's the thing. Do you want to tell us about Deadpool and Wolverine?
So I've done some more homework. I've watched Deadpool and Wolverine on Disney Plus. I'm mixed on it, if I'm honest, which is probably controversial because I know you liked it. It's like the Barbie film. You loved the Barbie film. I couldn't stick it. I thought the Deadpool Wolverine film was very funny. Really enjoyed it. How self-aware it was. Just so good. But I just didn't really like the story, if I'm being honest. It's just not my bag, the whole multiverse thing and all of that. And I hated, I'm going to give a small spoiler, the bit where the lady can put her hand in your head. That was not something I enjoyed watching at all. So I was gutted in a way, because I did think the script was very funny. They really worked with it. I loved it. But just the story, I couldn't do it. So for me, it's like if it was out of 5, it'd be 2.5. And the 2.5 is just for the funniness of it. It lost 2.5 because I just didn't enjoy the story. Sorry.
Interesting. I mean, I guess there's a bunch of stuff to unpack there. Some of which is, you haven't watched all the MCU films, have you?
I've watched a few, and my son wanted to watch this, and I was like, I don't think you can. It says 16 plus. So I then went and watched it, and I was like, he shouldn't be watching this. But we did go and watch Avengers Assemble, or whatever it's called. He kind of enjoyed it, but got a bit bored partway through, I think, because there's just so many characters to make note of and all their special powers. But no, I've watched a few, so I got some of the references, but not all of them.
Yeah, so that's part of it, is you're not going to get all the sort of in-movie references to things, all the X-Men jokes that were ongoing, all the cameos and things of people who came along, and from much older films. I didn't mind. I thought the visualization of the hands and the head thing was incredible. You're squeamish though, so I'm not surprised you struggle with that a little bit.
Even the thought of it now, just talking to you about that, I just didn't enjoy that at all. No, it's very funny, and I do like Matthew. I'm going to get his name wrong, Mr. Paradox.
McFadden,
who was out of Succession, but I struggle when I see him in anything else in a suit not to think of his Succession character, because that's what he's most prevalent as to me.
He's Mr. Darcy. What are you talking about?
I've not seen that either.
He was in Pride and Prejudice. I don't think he's as famous as Colin Firth. I don't think he's as famous as Colin Firth, but come on, good English actor. He is very good. And he was in Spooks, wasn't he? I didn't see Spooks. I thoroughly enjoyed Deadpool Wolverine. It's silly. I've happened to have landed on a clip where that word is shown. I thought it's homage, that's the right word, to previous Sony X-Men and Marvel movies was very well done. It probably doesn't help you haven't seen things like Loki season 1, which talks about where they went in that sort of wasteland. So I think you're probably the wrong audience member for it, frankly.
I wouldn't agree. I wouldn't disagree. Sorry. Like I said, I think the script was very funny, and I just watched it for the humour. I just don't enjoy the story. And we just watched Spider-Man, one of the multiverse ones, and just not my bag. I just don't enjoy that thread that they've been going down in more recent movies.
You didn't like Spider-Man 3, also one of the greatest films of all time. I'm just going to have to decide you've got terrible taste in movies, because you didn't like Barbie either, so, I don't know what to tell you. I don't know what to tell you. Tell us about Wallace and Gromit then.
Oh, I do have some good taste. So Wallace and Gromit, Vengeance Most Foul is coming. I didn't realise this was going to be on Netflix, but it's coming at Christmas. It's coming in January the 3rd. And I'm quite excited by this. I love Wallace and Gromit, and it's great. They're leaning back into some of the old stories, but it will be on Netflix, and this will make me go and subscribe to Netflix for a whole month, which is probably like 20 quid by January. But for me, it'll be worth it because I love Wallace and Gromit, so I'm looking forward to that.
How have they replaced the voice of Peter Sallis?
They've used somebody.
I don't know if it could. I will watch it because I love Wallace and Gromit as well, and having Feathers McGraw back will be great. But
I'm annoyed. I can't remember the guy's name. I read it just yesterday. They have replaced Peter Sallis with somebody else, which is a shame. Obviously Peter Sallis passed away, but it looks great, and it looks like they've done it in the style of Wallace and Gromit. So I'm super excited.
Yep, I think that's a good recommendation. I also will look out for that. Public Service Advisory.
Announcement, isn't it? Or advisory?
Is it advisory? Announcement?
PSA.
Whatever. PSA.
Great British Bake Off finales this week. Can't wait. Love it.
Okay, fair enough. No spoilers from us about what bakers have gone out yet or anything. I would say last week with Alison Hammond giving one of the bakers comfort about not having a complete meltdown and throwing everything away, it was one of the best bits of television I've seen. Alison has been a great co-presenter with Noel. I think she's one of the best that's been on there, and the warmth of her about trying to get people into positivity was just fantastic, and for me that was great.
She is the most positive person you're ever going to meet, is she not? Like, I don't know, She just comes across as, everything's positive. She'd be in the middle of this storm going, it's all right, at least the leaves are off the trees and we're getting on, and we're a day close to Christmas. She's just a very positive person. I love it. I think it works really well, and I didn't realise Prue Leith is like in her 80s, so fair play, she's turning up and doing that every week. So no, I think it's fantastic. It's a nice family show. I'm enjoying it with my family.
Yep, it's good. Just a very quick shout out to Taskmaster. There was a season finale of that week before last. That show managed to come back a little bit. That was the worst season, but actually the last 4 episodes were really, really good. So I'm glad it got back on track.
Yeah, I don't know what happened with Channel 4 in my house, but it just recommended we watch that last one, and we just watched the end one, and we said, we've skipped a bunch in the middle, and the boys weren't that bothered because we just didn't enjoy that series as much.
It wasn't a great series, but actually it finished strong, so I was okay with it.
Have you seen Junior Taskmaster?
I know, I'm aware that it's on. I haven't watched any.
Yeah, same. Maybe I might try that with my children.
Should we talk about some games?
Or a game.
A game. Well, we've got one game to talk about. So we've got Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024, which is a big tentpole game from Microsoft. If you're an Xbox Plus subscriber, you'll have got this as part of your subscription. It has a novel delivery method, almost entirely relying on Azure servers. So there was a small amount of preload, and then everybody wanted to hit it when it came out on November the 19th, and it didn't go well. Basically, it failed everywhere because Azure couldn't keep up with the on-streaming delivery of the content.
That's not good, is it? Microsoft's using their own tech and it's not worked. I know my son said it's about a 30 gig download. He's not started it yet. Whereas the previous one was about 125 gig, I think he had to install on his machine.
Yeah, so before it had local, they use a process called photogrammetry as part of how they show the world when you're flying over it, so you get quite realistic looking scenery and buildings and all this kind of stuff. And they were going to stream a lot of that rather than having a local install, so you'd have more active, better scenery of your local airport, for example, than you would have in the previous version of the game where that would have to be downloaded. And they could have up-to-date weather conditions and all that kind of stuff. Anyway, it hasn't gone well. The service crumbled. People were unable to log in. There were all manner of bugs. Wings would disappear off planes. Pilots would disappear. You have the ability to walk around planes and do all sorts of bits and pieces with it as well. I have downloaded this as well to my computer. I could get it to start. Looks very pretty, I must say, even on my now slightly aging gaming computer. But in the training mode, it asks you to go around the plane and like have a cursor. I couldn't get my pilot to walk. I couldn't get the menus to show up. So it was very pretty for the little bits and pieces. I got the flaps to go up and down on the plane, but that was it. So I was quite excited about this. I'm less excited now. They might have fumbled the launch somewhat.
It's a shame, isn't it? Because the previous flight sim had such a good reputation, I think, with the amount of quality that it delivered and the amazing scenery. It's a shame that they've slightly missed the mark with this one.
Yeah, I'm sure it will come back. I've been following Steve Troughton-Smith on Mastodon, and he has been posting some of his screenshots and everything from the game. And, it does look really nice, and he's having a really nice experience with it. I think he's one of the lucky ones. I don't know, Microsoft have better Azure servers in Ireland than they do in the UK. But and there's things in it now, like there's a career mode where you can land in places and take photographs and ferry people around. And that's never been a thing in the flight simulator games. They've always just been, now you're a commercial pilot, fly from here to there, or take your Cessna and fly around. And just the joy of buzzing around the world. Let's face it, flight simulators have always allowed you fly under bridges and do all that kind of stuff. So I think it's good that they've added much to it, but at the same time, launches like this will go badly. Customers will want refunds. If you are a Microsoft Xbox Premium or whatever it is customer, Ultimate, then it's just there as part of your subscription, but not everyone is.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. And if you've obviously ponied up a significant amount of money for this, you're going to have the same problems as the person who's getting it for free for their £10 subscription.
Yeah, and lots of people buy it on Steam, and Steam reviews tanked this, apparently.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Yeah, they did. So that's our game. Have you got anything in games to talk about this week?
There's an update out for Gran Turismo. But do you know what? I've just not been in the mood for playing games, if I'm being honest. I've like I said, I've watched a few things, so that's what I've spent my spare time doing this week.
Fair enough. Should we talk about BlueSky for a main show then?
Yeah, I'm interested to see where you're going to go with this. I've heard quite a lot of podcast talk around BlueSky. I've never used it, so I'm gonna let you walk me through it.
So, BlueSky has had something of a resurgence post the American elections. For the viewers of the podcast, I've popped up on the screen a live counter of BlueSky users as they're being added. And this is quite an interesting and sort of shows a philosophical difference between Twitter and BlueSky. And we'll come to my reservations in a minute, but the positive things. Lots of people joined BlueSky. It was getting 1 million users a day post the American elections. So it was sitting at about 12, 13 million users quite a long time. And as we look at it now, it's 21,103,000 and over 550,000 and counting up all the time. It's quite impressive, isn't it?
Really impressive. If only hopefully all these people that are joining BlueSky and leaving X, formerly known as Twitter, went out and voted.
Well, I don't know if they did. It doesn't really matter. The point is, there's a new social media. It's not new. BlueSky has been around for the last 2 years or something like that. And post the election, you have this bump in users. And it's an interesting sort of philosophical concept. Is BlueSky is meant to be decentralized in the same way that Mastodon is. It's not meant to be just one company in control. However, whenever there's issues with it, like when lots of users join, you see a problem with it and it goes down and you think, how decentralized is it? It's not federated in the same way that Mastodon is. It's an ex-Twitter, was he CEO? I forget what he was. Let's call him startup person who started BlueSky. It's meant to be more open. It has got an algorithm, but you don't need to ignore it. And for a long time, it was a bit of a ghost town. It used to be invite only. I got an invite a couple of years ago. I joined it just before I joined Mastodon. There wasn't a lot going on. There wasn't followers I was interested in, so I went away. Anyway, since this sort of influx of users from Twitter, and the fact that it's not just normal people that are leaving, we're seeing journalistic entities there, we're seeing sports people there, we're seeing celebrities there. Something is happening, in the sense that there's lots of people now leaving Twitter and going to BlueSky. And it feels like a bit of a critical mass. Things that have stopped happening before with, the fact, I can only get my sports news over on X as is, therefore I'm not leaving, or all my friends are on X, therefore I'm not leaving, or my audience is there. Actually, a lot of the core people, the influencers, have now moved to BlueSky, and I find that really interesting.
It is really interesting, isn't it? I mean, we had a little bit with Mastodon, didn't we? A little bit. Is this going to be the Twitter replacement that we're all looking for, where you've got sports there, journalists there, and that mixture of everything, whereas Mastodon's very tech-savvy people. It's in what it feels like. Is actually BlueSky going to do what we all hoped Mastodon was going to do and actually be the replacement Twitter? I mean, it looks like Twitter. I don't have to log in though as soon as I get there, and I can see a stream of stuff. So it's going to be really interesting, I think, to see how this goes. I mean, X just keep fumbling the ball at every opportunity, don't they? And are literally shedding users. I think we thought this was all done, but it's weird that this Blue Sky resurgence is doing what it is.
Yeah, I think we've seen this before. People went from MySpace to Facebook and all the rest of it, and it is possible if there's a big enough event that people will shift. And you and I left X a long time ago. I removed my research agency from there a long time ago, and we've been posting in alternative places. And I think this is a good thing to see, is that if you do get a critical mass, people will leave. And my sort of messing around with it, and going back to your story about Great British Bake Off, I forcibly engaged myself a little bit with Great British Bake Off. So there's a hashtag #GBBBO on Mastodon that's been like a ghost town when that's been happening, because I think there's lots of American users. However, on Blue Sky, it was like X used to be. It was funny, people were reacting with GIFs, it was appropriate, it was timely. I was really impressed about a real-time event, which is the thing Twitter was most famous for. I was actually able to follow and get good follow-on, even with people I didn't know over the course of that. So, for me, there is something here that wasn't there, or had gone missing for X. Now, I'm not walking away from Mastodon. I value its values more than I do Blue Sky, because I think if a billionaire comes along with enough money and starts putting them down in front of the owners of Blue Sky, it'll just become another X. But for now, it's really interesting.
And look, you've made me go and have a little look where you were just talking then, and I'm scrolling through it. I'm seeing some funny images. I've seen a bit of Formula One, and I was like, actually, this is what I used to go to Twitter for, a little bit of everything. So, maybe I'm going to have to set myself up an account and have a look at it.
I think you are. It's definitely worth a look. It's odd, and for the benefit of video viewers, and Chris won't even get to see this either, I will bring the BlueSky Client to the fore, so if you go on the video afterwards, you should be able to see this. I don't really like the client, in the sense that, certainly on the Mac, it's the same, it's the iOS client is what you get, which is slightly disappointing, really. We need clients. We need, Twitterific and others to come along and make alternative clients. And I think you can. I think it's not locked down just to the Blue Sky client. And the reason I think you can, as I hide that again, and I bring another tab to the fore, is that the Firehose, as they call it, that is the API that allows you complete access to all the things that are posted on it, is accessible. So for video viewers, check this out. That is on the screen now, and I don't know how well that'll animate for you, Chris, is all the live Blue Sky posts as they're happening right now, going on, that somebody overnight threw out a 3D visualization of. It's really cool.
That is quite cool. I mean, like I say, just looking at Blue Sky does feel a lot like Twitter, so hopefully they've got that third-party API piece. Maybe this is it. Maybe we are going to start seeing vans with a new logo on, because that's how you know something's happening. You see a van going around, it's got the Facebook logo on it, it's got an Instagram logo on it. Used to have a Twitter on it. That's kind of fallen away. X has never really replaced it, and a lot of people obviously have come off X. So super interesting if Blue Sky is going to be there.
Yeah, I think let's caveat it by saying, again, I think there's a chance it will go away and everybody will need to move again. So I'm not going anywhere on Mastodon, but for now, Blue Sky feels like the best days of Twitter, where you had that sort of engagement. You could follow hashtags. There were live events happening. There's new people and interesting people arriving all the time. They've got an interesting concept of packages, they're called. So I followed a data science community on there, where I added like 30 people who are big into data science, post a lot. As you get there, there's sporting packages. There's 9to5Mac have one if you want to follow all the journalists there. The Verge have one if you want to follow all the journalists there. And that's quite an interesting sort of concept, that, if you arrive in a social network with nobody that you would normally follow, you can go and find a predefined website or group that you're interested in and automatically be given all their user accounts. And you can choose whether you want to follow them or not. But otherwise, you're not sort of a slave to the algorithm. So I think it's a really interesting potential service.
Yeah, that is quite cool, isn't it, to get you up and running, that packages scenario that you've just outlined. I think that's quite neat. Yeah, I'm going to watch this tentatively, because I do miss Twitter as my news feed. I could look at tech, I could see Formula One or other things I was interested in. So, yeah, I'd like, if Blue Sky's going to replace it, I'd be all right with that. Fantastic.
App of the week?
Do it. Ooh.
So
I've just seen what you've put in the show notes.
So my app of the week this week is iPhone mirroring, which I think you've talked about before and we've talked about in the show as being a feature, but actually I've been using it more extensively this week. Just for a saver for installing lots of things on my work laptop. Rather than do that and install some of the weirder things, I thought, well, why don't I just try out the iPhone mirroring entirely without installing weird and wonderful apps? And it's been a pretty strong experience, I've got to say. It works well enough. I can copy and paste text in and out. I can post screenshots and things in and out. Photographs, everything. So actually, I'm quite impressed with it. Works all right.
Yeah, to be fair to Apple, they nailed it. I kind of wish I had this on my iPad, and I know my iPad basically runs with the software of my iPhone, but I don't install everything on my iPad that I've got on my phone. I don't need everything twice. I kind of wish I could do this iPad to iPhone, and I wish I could do Mac to iPad as well. I wish they just did more of a generic mirroring app and put it in more places, but I think it's really good, and I think they've done an excellent job.
It works well, and the notifications that would pop up on your iPhone when they start appearing in the control center on the Mac, that integration is really, really good as well. I could see that if they did do it for your iPad, then you could use a Mac to work. So that would definitely sort you out.
Yeah, I'd be quite happy with that. And with the notifications, just PSA again, you can customize that in notifications on the iPhone. There's a setting show this notification on Mac. You can turn it on and off and stuff. So I just think they've done a nice job of it.
Fair enough. Now, your app of the week is controversial because it should be in media, but I'm not going to pull you up on that at this late stage.
I don't have app of the week.
Sorry, thing of the week. Thing of the week. Go on then.
So I didn't really put this in media, but actually I really enjoyed it because I've watched a Francis Ford Coppola film, and not his new one, Megatropolis, which apparently has been really bad, but I've watched The Conversation, which is a 1974 film. It's got Gene Hackman as the main star. It's actually got Harrison Ford in it, which I didn't realise until he appeared on the screen in quite a small part, and this was obviously filmed before Star Wars. But what an interesting film. It's basically all around Gene Hackman trying to film a conversation, and it starts off with this conversation in a square, and they're trying to film it obviously with 70s technology, and it was just quite interesting about this character he doesn't even have a home telephone because he's paranoid he's going to get bugged and things like that. Just really good film, really well filmed, quite slow going, very typical 70s film, but yeah, would recommend if anybody wants to see a slow paced film with a bit of a tech lean, bit of bent on privacy, I guess. And so it's just quite interesting watching it 50 years later, and they're still, back then this was a film about people being worried they were being recorded and watched and what have you. Just thought it was quite cool, so would recommend.
Fair enough, good recommendation. Still think it belongs in media. I would say I saw a thing on YouTube hypothesizing that Gene Hackman's character in this is the same character as then in a later film, Enemy of the State with Will Smith, also
Yes.
about being observed by the government.
Yeah, so if you scroll down, it's got on the Wikipedia page that you're currently on. In other media, it does detail that. It's the last section just above "See also" and references. There you go. Oh, yours is different to mine. That's interesting. Why is yours different to mine?
It's there, Enemy of the State. It's in references.
But yeah, so in Enemy of the State, Gene Hackman plays a similar character that's paranoid about being bugged and tracked, and his photo that they used in that film to show Gene Hackman's character younger was the photo out of this movie, The Conversation. So there is a link there. So it feels like Enemy of the State was a similar concept, but obviously a lot newer and a lot more modern. But I just really enjoyed this film. It's about a 2-hour film. It was interesting to watch it. A, very slow. B, the tech very different. And they've done a 2024 restoration of it, and it did look amazing. So would recommend. So there you go.
Well done. And you could have been watching Silo, but I'm glad you watched that instead.
Do you know what? This just popped up, and you know what I mean? Something just grabs you. And it's like,
Yep.
Oh, that looks kind of interesting. I like Gene Hackman. I've never watched. I don't normally watch old films like this. So yeah, just grabbed me at the right time.
Fair enough. I think we can call that a show, Chris.
Let's do it. So if anybody would like to get in contact with us, Rod is at G5Maniac at Mastodon.Scott. I'm at _CGP at Mastodon.social. You can watch us on YouTube if you go to wakefromsleep.com and click on the YouTube link, or you can drop us an email at wakefromsleep@protonmail.com.
Talk to you next week, Chris.
Cheers, Rod.